Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the tavern. This is Gatekeepers. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Balance, the False God. If you haven't already done so, please consider hitting that subscribe button to this channel and the other channels linked in the video description below. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please make sure to hit that like button. If you don't like the content tonight, feel free to hit the dislike button. You won't hurt my feelings either way. It just helps the channel grow. Without further ado, let's get into the panel. Hello, my name's Jaide, and this is my tavern. Welcome. Joining me tonight is, well, the man, the myth, the legend, the Shadow from Shadow and Sun. Welcome, sir.
So now I'm a committee.
Yes, how are you,
doing,
sir?
man? I'm doing great, living the dream, trying to, just enjoy this hobby as, much as I can with a whole bunch of great people these days. It's
Awesome.
It's truly a blessing.
I just realized my studio light is not on, so I'm going to be getting up to turn that on in just a moment. Welcome to the chat, everyone. The Six Nations, Fleety, Crafting, L. Welcome, welcome. Tonight's topic is, well, it's about the concept of balance versus fairness, really. To be balanced or not to be balanced. That is the question. Whether it is nobler to, be fair rather than suffer the nuances of balance and, of a game session. So our focus is mostly going to be on, first defining what is game balance in design terms, and then discussing what we believe is fair as far as game mastery, and talking about how can we be fair game masters rather than balanced game masters. We're going to get into some of the nuances of that as well. So bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to go turn my studio light on. I'll be right back.
So the show's all mine. It happens to every show, folks. I think the first time it happened, it was with Connell. Oh my God, that was hysterical. He left me alone with the show for 20 minutes. You remember that way back in the day?
I think so. Yeah, like I said, it wasn't going to take me very long. I just needed to turn on the studio light. So
I just had to make the joke.
I've got a GM Johnny in here too. Welcome, sir. Scott Clark, justice versus fairness. I'm not saying justice versus fairness. What I'm going to be focusing on is, in terms of game balance as the mechanics, as the increasing of levels versus the increasing of monster capability. It's this thing that, especially for 3.5, it was a hard focus there with the challenge rating system. And what you had was, as the players leveled up, the monsters leveled up, and really there was no net gain anywhere. It was this nebulous thing that, oh yeah, I'm level 10 now, I should be able to fight tons of things. But the things that were on your level to fight were just like fighting the goblins at level 1. You didn't really gain any true edge in the combats because all the combats were balanced with the CR system.
That makes me feel things, as DM James would say. We never had that so much of an issue back in the day. Mind you, you guys all know I'm a 1E guy, dyed in the wool. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. You're supposed to run away sometimes. You're not supposed to go into every encounter thinking, it's a 50-50 or better, because I know actually the players are thinking, well, we should be able to just, more or less win every time we come to a monster encounter. No, you really shouldn't. As a matter of fact, my school of thinking is you guys should probably run away 90% of the time and come back with a better strategy, a better plan, better tools, something like that. And then, use a whole lot of trickery as opposed to just rolling 20s to hit and, powering through it with, damage versus hit points. That's kind of just like a video game mentality, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, in a way, yes. A lot of video games, especially for like the JRPG type games. I'm going to be getting MarHawkman here in just a second. He's backstage. And you're right. It is kind of video gamey in the aspect of you could almost go to no area you weren't ready for.
Yep.
And that was a lot of there were a lot of games like that, especially
And
JRPGs.
in the combat as well. If you think about the combat, it would depend on the exact type of game. I'm thinking of games like Gauntlet, not the old arcade version, but some of the ones that came out later. If you hit the monster like 2 or 3 times, it's going to fall down, and then you go on to the next one. But it was always about hordes of monsters. Even in the PlayStation 4 version that I played with the boys, uh, uh, where there'd be a whole bunch of mooks, whatever you want to call them, and you could just power through those guys, no problem. But then there'd be like 4 or 5, tougher guys, and then you clear that room, you go into the next room, and eventually you get to the big bad guy, and it takes all 4 of you concentrating on it to kill it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles versus Shredder kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, but never in a video game do you come across a monster that you just can't beat. You got to run back out of the dungeon and go back to town, heal up, and come up with some better, strategy, by using things other than just your swords and your spells. Sometimes you need to lay a trap. Sometimes you need to, find a way to get behind the monster with the right character, or things like that. And there's no real thinking anymore. It's just boom, boom, boom. Let's see who wins by die rolls, and that's it. It's I don't know.
So let me bring on
Guys,
Mar here.
What's up, Mar?
Welcome, Mar.
Hello. You were speaking of Gauntlet Dark Legacy. Oh yes.
I was actually speaking of I was also speaking about the new, not the new one, because the one for PlayStation 4. Me and the boys and my son's roommate Alex, his sister, the 4 of us would play, and it was a really, really fun game. But there were times where we'd all get killed. What's up, Bo?
Yeah.
Lady, everybody in the chat.
Well, one of the things that I remember about Gauntlet that really, really made me love that game series, back when it was still good, anyways. But that's beside the point. The version that I'm specifically thinking of, Gauntlet Dark Legacy, was the GameCube version, and what was so great about that is the simple fact that you needed to think about what you were doing. You couldn't just like slap everything to death. If you just run into the middle of the room, you might get overwhelmed with sheer numbers and not be able to kill everything fast enough. Granted, it's still a game where you're expected to kill literally everything that moves and then move on. But it's a game where you need to think about it. And there's like certain things you can do in the game where, it's like, from the monster's point of view, it's utterly unfair that players can do this. But from the player's point of view, well, I mean, it's just thinking smart. Like, there's one specific example where it's a room with a huge number of enemies in it. However, if you attack the wall in the hallway from the outside of the room, which is something you can actually see that you can do while you're just playing this normally, you'll kill like half the enemies in the room before you even get a walk into the room. It's just one of those like fighting smart versus just fighting harder.
So let's get into the topic, shall we? Let's kind of get into the questions and get into what we got planned for the night. So, in terms of game design and the concept of continual escalation, where players become more powerful and their foes become equally powerful, where does the fun of the game come from for you, either as a player or as a game master? Shadow, I'm going to start with you.
The story as it emerges is the fun for me. Combat's cool, but if it's nothing but combat, then maybe a war game or a board game is more more what you're actually looking for, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do every aspect of the hobby except probably like Magic the Gathering, and I don't know if that counts, but you guys get my point. Um, it's about what's happening, not what I rolled, not how much damage I did, not even the treasure. Although the treasure is a big part, I'm not going to lie. I really like finding cool magic items, especially if they're tailor made for my character, or as a DM, if I'm tailor making it for someone else, then I like to tailor make magic items. But what's really happening in the story? You know what I mean? What if someone was, like, say, a player in your game goes out and meets a bunch of normies, and they say, well, what are you into? Maybe he's trying to pick up a girl or something. It's like, what are you into? Well, I play Dungeons and Dragons. Well, I heard about that. Well, what's that like? And then you go in and you start talking about your character, and you start telling the story. You don't tell, the hot chick at the bar, I rolled a bunch of 20s one night and everybody went crazy. No, you tell the story, right?
If that's your thing at a bar, sure.
I'm just using the most extreme example, as highly unlikely as it, might or might not be. But or your family, or your brother, or somebody who doesn't know what the heck it is you're actually doing, at the table with a bunch of screaming, Dorito eating, weirdos. You tell the story, and then if they're interested in the story, well then, reel them in. But talking about the mechanics and things like that, that's we all play a million different games. I'm not gonna reminisce when I'm old and gray, oh wait, too late, about the mechanics. I'm gonna reminisce about the story and maybe the friends at the table. I want to have these good stories, as my takeaway.
There you go, Shadow. Well, you just got something for you there.
I saw that. You know what? It could happen. Stranger things, or better yet, maybe carry an extra dice bag with you with some nice pink or purpley sparklies, and go, hey, baby. I don't know. Just saying.
My goodness, the chat is just moving tonight. Thank you. So, what about you, Mar? When the game is designed in such a way to have players escalate in power, but also have their foes escalating in equal power, where is the fun for you, either as a player or as a game master? Like, where is the fun at?
See, as a player, getting new abilities and having more options in combat is nice, but one thing which is, I guess, me looking more at it from a game master perspective, is that the whole idea of 1 to 20 and then, oh, you're max level now, where max level is practically a god, I hate that. Because of the fact that it means that anything that's higher level than you is incredibly dangerous, and okay, granted, this is something that I see more in non-TTRPGs, more in computer games, but games where you have level 1 to 100, where things that are higher level than you are only slightly stronger than you. To me, that honestly feels better than a game where you go from someone who has minor skills with a sword to someone who can like cut a mountain in half with a sword a few levels later. It's like, that's just like, it's not power creep. That's like strapping a ballistic missile to your back and zooming towards the moon.
Okay. See, for me, as a game master, I like seeing my players get these new abilities and then be like, yeah, I really like to use this thing, But then I also have those players, and my wife is actually one of them, those players who go, hey, I want to take this role play ability or this role play feature, that's, that will give me slight advantages during non-combat scenarios. And I really enjoy the players who look at those options and take those options for their characters. Is it entirely necessary? Some might say no, it's not entirely necessary. So, there are some game masters out there who don't even have those abilities as an option. Because they're relying on their players to be role players rather than dice rollers. But I like having a mix of both. I like having the mix of the combat oriented or combat minded player, but I also like having the encounter minded player, the one who's going to be like, if we approach this a different way, we're going to get a different outcome, that it doesn't lead to just straight violence. There is another way. And I really enjoy those players, actually a little more than I enjoy the combat players. Sometimes I don't give them a choice. Sometimes the only choice is violence. But that depends on the scenario itself that they have found themselves in or wandered into. So as far as game balance goes, and the concept of continual escalation, I really enjoy my players taking abilities that help them in the game, be it for combat or roleplay. So balance in the terms of game design. That this is where I'm kind of leading into. Balance is this linear progression of power that where the challenges the players are facing in terms of like the random number generator via die roll are no different than those that the player will face from level 1 to level whatever, level 100, level 3000. The die roll generator, it doesn't really ever change. You just continually move the numbers up. The HP moves up. The to hit moves up. The to not take damage also moves with this. So in this definition, there truly is no escalation, only the illusion of escalation. Yes, a level 20 player can walk into a den of goblins and slaughter the entire den. But that's not where the challenge is. That's not, sure, they themselves have escalated and the goblins can't, but that's putting onerous on the game master to set up challenges that challenge the players, and put them on the same curve, or at least in the same area code of the or of what the players are capable of. So how do we define, like I've already kind of given my definition of how I define balance. So Shadow, how do you define game balance, mechanically speaking?
To be honest, I really don't.
Okay.
The game either has it or it doesn't. I play a lot of different games. Like Traveler's a great example. The challenge is never about like your players getting better, so to speak. A lot of skill-based systems, no matter how good you are, you're not getting beefier and more hit points and things like that. You may be a little bit better to hit and things like that, but you're not getting so powerful that you can, like someone said earlier, punch a god in the face. So it's a constant. Do you get yourself in the situation or not? If you do, you may have gotten yourself into a situation you cannot handle. And I like that idea even in level-based games, where if you get yourself into the wrong situation, you die or you run. If you really think you're going to just slug it out, that's your own ego getting in the way of you. And what did Bing Rames say about pride? It's a mother. Don't let it mess with you. If you're not ready for it, don't do it. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. And that crime is going to be rolling up a new character because you just pissed away that character that should have known better. You're 4th level and there's an ancient red dragon. You go back to town or something. You tell everybody and warn them. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do. The most logical choice. Not it's in our way. We must be able to beat it because the DM put it in our way. No, I put it in your way because to let you know that there's one coming and maybe you can help the town survive the attack until you go on a bunch of side quests, and now you're ready to fight the dragon. But at fourth level, not so much. And then there's other games like Palladium, where the character, you can make up a party of first level characters that some of them are guaranteed to absolutely just freaking die. But the ancient, or the dragon hatchling character that someone rolled up, he's just going to walk through everything. Some games are not meant to be balanced, and that's up to the players and the DM to come up with a well-rounded party, so that you are protecting that 4 hit point magic user from dying, because he literally cannot do anything until 5-7 levels from now, when he'll be the most powerful character in the party.
Yeah, that's another thing I personally don't like. It's like, oh, you're useless at this level, but you'll be useful at a later level if you live.
That's life. That's the way life is.
I know.
Some people are not meant to do certain things. It's just, that's the way it is. And this game is more of a I hate to use the word, but simulation of life. It's not supposed to be fair to everybody. You're supposed to figure out that something unfair is coming. Let's get out of the way. Something unfair is coming. Let's not be here when it gets here. Let's find a way around it, as opposed to always going through it.
Well, okay. As someone pointed out in one of the our earlier discussions about combat encounter design, sometimes monsters are really just an obstacle, and the real challenge for the players is figuring out how to bypass the obstacle. Killing the monster, it's an option. Is it a good option? Maybe not.
It could very well be an impossible option. The Lord of the Rings, not the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, when they came across the trolls, there was no way they were going to fight their way out of that. It wasn't meant to be that. Obviously it's a story, and it was meant to, follow a certain path. There was no options. But if you were playing it out as a a game, and the characters come upon, they see the trolls, and they're still undiscovered, if all of the dwarves decided to go and attack the trolls, they're going to end up in the pot, but in pieces, as opposed to just in bags.
Well, I mean, in one of the Hyperborea games I was in, we had an encounter, I've mentioned this previously, where this giant worm thing pops up out of a sandy beach and starts spitting acid at us. Realistically, while the thing was killable, odds of us actually killing it and getting anything of any real value out of killing it, statistically insignificant. We actually had one player character and an NPC helper just get liquefied by acid spit. And, that was with us running away, because the monster worm was an obstacle. It wasn't an objective to kill. It was just like, oh, hey, you walked onto the beach. Here's a thing that lives on the beach. Now what are you going to do?
So in that example, you've described something that is more like an actual escalation of events, or escalation of power, where the players aren't capable of handling the situation. However, did you have warning before going there that it was there?
This is actually one of those where, in theory, you could figure out that there was a giant acid-spitting worm living on the beach. Or if one of the members of the party is a little too gung-ho and not cautious, he'll just run into the middle of the beach and trigger the worm aggro before anyone has a chance to look. Although the way I remember this particular beach is described as having weird acid burns that just don't look normal.
Okay. So, we've taken the moment to define like what balance is in terms of mechanics. The concept of, all, continual escalation for both players and monsters. So what is fairness? And Mara, I'm going to start with you. What do you believe is fairness in terms of game mastery to the players?
Well, I mean, going back to the worm example, one of the things about that encounter that made it fair was we had no reason to fight the thing. It's just a random obstacle for us to deal with. So running away was something we could have done before we even aggroed the thing. Which, that's part of what makes the encounter fair, is that even if it's an enemy that's functionally or completely impossible for the party to kill, if you as the DM aren't putting them in a position where they need to kill it, whatever.
Okay. So this goes to you then, Shadow. Like, how do you define or describe fairness, from the game master to players? Like, what is fair to you?
Two things. One, right off the bat, I'm going to use the rules for the most part as written. If I have changes to the rules, I let them know. If we decide in the middle of a session we're going to change the rules, we try to document it, or at least try to remember it. Those of us that are sober, and remember that that's how it's going to be from that point on. The other thing is, you give them an out for the most part. I mean, there are going to be some times, especially as the game progresses, where there is no out. You have put yourself in a situation. It's time to literally put up or shut up. Roll those dice and hope for the best, because you're not getting out of here. You're in the lair of the Lich. You're not teleporting out. You're not, running away. He's locked all the doors and he wants a big showdown. Okay? It's for the most part those two things. If everybody goes into the game knowing the rules, then play by the rules. If you don't know the rules, learn them. And if you go into a situation and you bit off more than you chew, you need to learn that lesson. I can't hold your hand and give you that magical out because you're the players. Sometimes there's going to be a TPK. Sometimes you're going to get your hand chopped off. Sometimes you're going to lose your favorite magic items. Them's the breaks. But there's always a way. Unless your lightsaber gets destroyed as it falls into the gravity well of Bespin, sucks. But maybe there's a chance you can recover your holy sword or your magic wand or whatever that you've lost. Okay,
or at least just get a new one.
Right, but if it's a lot of times players get really attached, and if I take something away, like for whatever reason, unless it's destroyed, there's probably a way to get it back. You beat up the guy who's got it. Okay, you punch him in the face, you take back your sword. Okay, problem solved.
That's actually something that goes back to the worm encounters. That one of the rules for the acid spit is that you had to roll a saving throw for every magic item a player hit by it had on them. Any magic item that fails the saving throw is destroyed.
Okay, well, why? It's weird that you said magic item. What about their other stuff? You mean their clothes and their armor and their hair? Magically don't get destroyed.
No, those don't get saving throws. Let's put it that way.
Okay. That's kind of what I figured.
Like the one guy we had get hit by acid and live, I had to have my priest character heal him multiple times just to have him regain the ability to see.
Totally fair.
And of course, he came out of the encounter naked with like a handful of things laying on the ground next to him that survived, because that's just how taking a bath in worm acid works.
Right.
So
as it should be.
As far as fairness, Elle hit it on the nose before anyone else got a chance to. Fairness is consistency. Some may posit that fairness is sending encounters that, or not sending encounters that could TPK the party. But that assertion is not what I mean in terms of fairness. What I mean is the game master provides all of the information the players need, but not the solutions to make informed decisions, even if they are chasing a red herring. If you warn your players about the dangers of entering a mountain pass or a beach that has some kind of awful danger there, and you warn them multiple times, you could do it once, you could do it multiple times, you could even give them a living example. You tell them, hey, the townsfolk say don't go into the mountains because there be giants, and the players go into the mountains and they come across a giant beating the ever-living crap out of an owlbear. Well, they have that moment right there to walk away. If they choose not to, that is their decision. They have made their choices. And as Bo says here, if the players paint themselves into a massive corner, is that fair? Is that even fair? Yes, it is absolutely fair. If the players paint themselves into a corner, well, they have to figure out how to paint themselves out of the corner. Because the game master gave them fair warning to begin with, or in theory should have.
That poor boy down.
There should always be signs that there is something potentially dangerous up ahead, and stick to the rules. Don't stray off on the path, making your own mechanics mid game. If you're gonna make a mechanic for a game, put it through the test. Does it present a dilemma? Does it, is it cool? Is it, all these things? But don't do it mid game. Present it to the table after the game has ended and be like, hey, I'm wanting to introduce this thing. What do you think about it? Let me know. But don't change the rules of the game, especially not, while you're currently playing it. Be consistent. Make rulings and be consistent with those rulings. That is fairness.
When I discussed rule changes, etc., mind you, I'm talking about games that didn't have every single possible breath codified. There are a lot of games out there, especially in the old days, where you would literally have to make a ruling because there was no rule.
Well, like the first thing I thought of is, introducing a character who uses a, shall we say, unique form of magic to a game that has like set schools of magic. And so you're basically just like making crap up so that this character does stuff that no one else does. I mean, that's the sort of thing I was thinking of when you said like adding rules in the middle of the game, because you have to add rules for how this character's stuff.
No, absolutely not. No. That's if you're starting to do stuff like that, you might want to think about writing your own game or writing up a whole book of supplementary material. But I play, a lot of old school games where, there's a 100-page book and that's it. That's all there ever was. That's all there's ever going to be. You can go looking around for stuff, but yeah, right. You write down the rulings because a lot of games literally said that, that's exactly going to happen. You as a GM, dungeon master, whatever, are going to have to make rulings, and if that's the thing that's going to happen again, well, you've just made a rule, and you might want to write it down or,
yeah, I mean,
record it or something.
Well, what I just described absolutely fits into the category of homebrew. That's for sure.
And homebrewing is absolutely fine, so long as the game master keeps it fair and consistent throughout the gameplay. In 20 levels, if you come back to that same sand monster or whatever it is, that spits acid, is it still going to be a challenge? Is it going? You have the warning beforehand. It exists on the beach now. Now it's still fair, but now that you have the pre-knowledge of it, you can actually formulate a plan to deal with it if you decide to go back and kill it. But killing it wasn't the objective. It was just an obstacle in the path. And it sounds like your group circumnavigated it by simply leaving and going around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I address something Bruce just said when you're done there, Mark?
Sure.
Well, the whole thing I was saying about those, like introducing a new thing that hadn't existed in the game before and rules associated with it, rather than changing an existing thing. That's the distinction I was trying to draw. Yeah.
So, Shadow, you said you wanted to chime in on Bruce's comment?
The one before that one.
Okay.
I'm sure you probably already know, Bruce, but back in the old days, you'd get XP for, avoiding combat sometimes just as well as for going into the combat. If the reward system in Pathfinder allows it, I would think about, showing them without telling them that, oh, well, because you avoided this combat, cleverly, with an ingenious way to, get by this encounter and move on by. I'm going to give you the XP, or similar XP, maybe even more to kind of really drive the point home that, hey, since you didn't waste your your magic and your items and stuff trying to, beat your way through every single combat or this particular combat, I'm giving you X XP so that maybe they'll think about, well, we could fight it and lose a bunch of healing potions and hit points and maybe somebody die, or we could try to find a way to sneak around this, and actually get to our goal instead of, them actually looking forward to every single combat because that's the only way they get or perceive they get experience points to go up levels. Because I've had that happen where it's like, players they don't want to miss an encounter to the point where they'd even make noise to attract stuff just because they wanted another combat. Just because someone's, $8,000 away from a level, they're not being quiet. They're hoping for a battle because more than likely they'll be able to take it and, nickel and dime their way up to the next level, depending on, the system, etc.
That reminds me of one of the interesting things with Hyperborea is that it actually does have rules for gaining XP for non-combat interactions with the world. So, right. I mean, if you do like an epic speech test where your characters are spending like an hour talking to the local warlord about fiscal policy and, matters of state, and you successfully talk him into signing a peace treaty instead of, murder hoboing him, that would count as, defeating him, and you would get the XP for it.
And so the concept of the game balance and whatnot, I would have players who would fight me on this consistently. I would design encounters that were 8, 10, because I was running 3.5 at the time. I would design encounters that were 5 to 10 levels higher in challenge rating above the players, and they kept saying, "Well, that's not a balanced encounter. That's not not a fair encounter." I'm like, no, it's a fair encounter because I'm telling you about it. You are told in advance, like, here is the scenario. If you decide to, and here's the layout of the area. I've got some pre-knowledge because you had scouts in the area. Go scout out this location. Where all these enemies are in this camp. And if you make too much noise, you're going to attract all of them to your location, which is going to be bad for you. Like, that is information you have at your disposal. And if you don't put those things together, that's not necessarily unfair, because you didn't put it together. Like, oh, wait, if I make too much noise, the whole camp comes to kill me. Put some things together, put some thought into it. But at the same time, I'm not going to make my entire area, one challenge rating, to appease the players' capabilities. There are going to be things in there that are going to outpace the party. There are going to be encounters or bows in that area that are going to be underpowered by comparison to the party, because there's always somebody better, there's always somebody weaker. And the concept there is I'm not caring about the actual balancing of numbers. Like, I don't give two craps about oh yeah, if I roll a 15 or better, I can hit everything within my challenge rating. I don't care about that. I'm going to be throwing things in there that is above your challenge rating.
What kind of freaking? Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah, that's the concept. There is with the challenge rating method in D&D 3.5 Pathfinder 1E. it has there's this entire benchmark thing that you can run your character by the numbers, and if as long as you're hitting 75% of the time on the first attack, and I think it's like 60% on the second attack, that's the sweet spot. And like I said, there are sheets and calculations out there that have all of those numbers there. It's the benchmarks of character design in those games. It's kind of why I'm leaving those games behind and going to something that is more rules light, and that I have more freedom as a game master to just say, yeah, this monster doesn't follow those rules. This monster has 10 hearts of health, and it has like 4 main abilities and has 3 actions per round. I'm not following the same criteria for building my monsters as my players, but I'm still keeping it fair because they're going to know about it before they get there. There's going to be warning signs before they get there, and they have to figure out what to do, and like what kind of plan or method of attack that they're going to come up with, or in some cases, rare cases for a lot of tables, a method of diplomacy. Like, how are they going to approach the situation? And it's in those wide swings away from the balance point that I find the game to be kind of the most fun. Sometimes you need those daring moments where the players are like hanging on by their fingernails on the edge, just like, are we going to make it? But then you have those moments where you let the players feel amazingly powerful, pulling that Legolas and Gimli nonsense of, oh yeah, 1 shot, 1 kill, 1 swing, 1 kill, or 1 shot, 10 kills. Like, give them those moments to let them feel powerful, lift them up. But at the flip side of that, put enemies that will absolutely scare the pants off them. Foes, like even roleplay foes. The players come up to a king. The moment they smart off to that king's gonna be like, "You're going to the stocks. You're going to jail, or off with their head."
The ring raid.
Yeah,
all through the Lord of the Rings. Oh my God! Nobody wanted to freaking any part of that shit. You know what I mean? When you were reading those books, as a kid or whatever, you knew this was death. Okay. There's nothing you can do, period. Nothing you can do. You need to run. And that feeling of, reading, when I was, reading the Lord of the Rings for the first time, of, oh my God, they're going to die. They're going to die, but then they didn't. It's like that's completely gone from the game, or the hobby, I should say, because different games, kind of try and inspire that feeling of fear, Call of Cthulhu, etc. A lot of people, that's what, ask Max about the giant ants. That's one of his most treasured memories of the hobby, is literally being scared shitless because of an imaginary creature in an imaginary game, in an imaginary situation that he got to carry with him throughout the rest of his life. And they want to take that away. Hard pass.
Yeah.
I guess being scared is no longer, what it used to be.
There are players out there who don't appreciate the power creep against them as players. I understand that. I'm going to say, when I was much younger, this was 20 years ago, I didn't appreciate the power creep, against me as the player. I've grown since then. I've learned, oh no, the power creep even against me makes me want to be stronger, makes me want to think, better strategies, and not just rush into combat, fist swinging. I played monks for years because I just loved the concept, and I was also into martial arts myself as a young person. So my monks would constantly run into combat. They were not wise, even though their stats said they were wise. They were not very wise. They would often approach things kind of in a bullheaded, headstrong, flavor or method. which I have learned the error of my ways, and I no longer do that with my monks. My monks are now more focused on paths of peace rather than war. Like they seek the wisdom of an encounter, not the conclusion of the encounter.
Yeah. What is true mastery of the martial arts?
When you don't have to use it.
Yeah. It's like, I forget which martial arts movie it was, but it's one where someone is asking a teacher, like, what is the best way of using the martial arts? And that's exactly what he says, like figuring out how to avoid fighting in the first place.
Yeah, because you never know when someone's just going to go.
Well, like, this is something that really, really bugged the heck out of a lot of people when they did this a few years ago. And I don't remember the name of the computer game, but it's just one of those games that's infamous for killing your character or nearly killing your character in a cutscene. It's like you're doing this epic boss fight, and then if you win the boss fight, someone shoots you from off screen.
But I thought that was a recent thing. I thought that might have been like a Diablo thing.
No, it's not Diablo. It's
Okay.
one of the ninja ones.
Oh, okay.
But the whole thing is like part of the reason why you want to avoid combat, though, is that maybe the person you're fighting is really just a distraction while someone else is sneaking up behind you.
So we've kind of talked about the concept of game balance and why you should ignore balance, because it is the false idol, it is the false god. Having a truly perfectly balanced game, in all honesty, gets boring. It just does.
Yeah, you summed it up with. I mean, if I know literally what I need to hit already with every, until I go up like basically another level, I know what I need to hit every freaking monster in the game. What the hell is that? That sounds like lazy. Okay, let's make it as easy as possible for the DM, so that he doesn't have to look in a book to see what an armor class is.
I mean, this is why I'm a big fan of DMs just making stuff up when they are doing a combat encounter. It's like, okay, this time you're fighting a purple dragon, and the players are like, wait, purple dragons don't exist in the monster manual, and the DM is like,
right,
yes,
they don't.
That's the whole point. I mean, that the original Dungeon Master's Guide, had a lot of tips on making your own freaking monsters, especially from the Nether Plains and stuff like that. Make up your own dang monsters. What better way to really put the fear of God into your game other than I'm in charge, remember?
And actually, to bring up a good point or a caveat on that is, I was playing in Scott's game 2 weeks ago now, or a week and a half ago now, and he has these humanoid spider monsters. Now everybody immediately goes, "Oh yeah, those are driders." No, these aren't driders. You might think of them as driders. Now our characters are from a different world. They've never seen drow. They don't have drow in their world. They don't have driders in their world. So when we come across these spider torsoed or spider abdomen and torsoed beings that have the upper body of more of like I think it was like a Drugar. I think is how he described it. More dwarf-like. We had no basis of understanding of what these creatures were. They were outrightly evil. Yes, they were. And I was playing a paladin, but I was also outnumbered and outgunned. So I had to play the diplomacy card, even though I really, as a player, really, really did not want to. You put spiders, giant, like 3 times bigger than a human spider in the world. I'm gonna want to cleave it into multiple pieces. I don't want to leave it living. I will burn entire forests down full of spiders.
One of my personal favorite memories involving spider enemies is the lair of the Spider Queen from Gauntlet
yes.
Dark Legacy. Why? Because it's one of the Gauntlet Dark Legacy has 8 worlds. We have to defeat each of the world bosses to get the things you need to beat the big bad guy who you think is the real big bad guy but isn't. Blah blah blah. Whatever. Well, the Spider Queen is also the mother of all of the spider monsters you fight in the forest. Which means that in theory, all of those spider monsters, if they were to live long enough, would turn into humanoid spiders like she is. And it's none of those like weird dark elf things. No, these are just monster spiders. Hundreds of them.
Mar, all spiders are monsters. All spiders are monsters.
I mean, yes, but most spiders aren't large enough to bench press a Buick.
Responding to chat real quick. Justin wants me to change your name to something else, Shadow.
I was bringing that up though because the fact that that's like, yes, aesthetically the Spider Queen looks very similar to a Drider. However, in terms of what she does, who she is nothing like a Drider.
No, she's definitely more like a demon.
I thought she literally was a demon.
In some iterations.
Those games really don't go into that level of detail on what the world bosses are. It really doesn't. Like one of them is a zombie. He's like a 12-foot tall zombie. Where he came from, we don't know. And another one is literally a pile of magically animated ooze.
Yeah. Magically animated what?
Ooze.
A giant green slime monster.
I totally thought I heard something different.
I think I know what you heard.
Like, what? Mar, that is very uncharacteristic of you.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of spiders. Let's put it that way. Yeah. If I can see an 8-legged creature walking around in my home, it dies. I don't let it go outside. I don't put it outside. No. It just straight up dies. I don't tolerate it. Suffer not a poisoner to live. So let's move on to consequences of the the options of fairness. We've already kind of talked about like what is fairness. It's being consistent. It's giving the forewarning to the players, telling them, hey, this is what's in the region, either through role play opportunities, through signs, through whatever method you want to get the message across that, hey, here be monsters. Or here be like proprietary, or I'm sorry, not proprietary. Here be proper manners. Like you're going to be going in front of a king. You mind your P's and Q's. You're going into a cave system. That there's probably going to be monsters of some kind there. It's kind of a given, especially if you're told well in advance. We've kind of covered that. So, what are the consequences or outcomes, good or bad? Or rather, let me restate that. Consequences or outcomes, good or bad, are the results of choice. All players have choice, and you should let them freely choose what they decide to do. But
yeah, there's nothing worse than a DM taking over your player character for whatever reason. I absolutely despise that. Don't tell me, how I feel. Don't tell me what I'm thinking. Let me do that on my own. It's my character. You can tell me what I see, what I hear, what I feel, physically, what I smell, but don't, I mean, unless, it's a piece of information that I should have, from ancient history or lore or something like that. Okay, maybe. But, when you tell me, my character does this, what? No, that's the, unless, again, like if you're under a fear spell or something like that, or a charm spell, maybe, or more likely. But Otherwise, hands off my character. I mean, you want to do damage, that's fine. That's even fair. But
and even like game masters doing moments of, oh yeah, you take like wisdom or intelligence based damage in this area, and you're going to continue to do so if you stay here or linger here. Like that is a like, oh, what's going on? Like, why am I taking damage? Well, this is kind of a advanced fear effect. It's starting to whittle on your mind. The longer you stay here, the more damage mentally you're going to take. Even putting that fear of, oh, I'm losing the ability to do things, that should get them to move on their own, typically. So thinking about consequences or outcomes, how do you determine the extent or severity of the consequence to a particular course of actions or challenge? Let's put it like that. How do you determine like what happens next based on what the players do? Can you kind of provide an example? I'm stumbling over my words tonight. I'm going to start with Mar on this one.
Well, I mean, it all depends on what the course of action is. I mean,
Okay.
like the whole like room full of spiders example. Someone decides to run into the room full of spiders and get the attention of all 20 of them. Are you sure you want to do that? Yeah, that extra sinister. Are you sure you want to do that? Because quite frankly, having 20 spiders suddenly attack you all at once in a single round of combat seems suicidal. But I mean, again, it's about what the scenario is, though. Is that like okay, but the player has so decide to start killing random spiders that aren't even actually hostile. Whatever.
You're damn right I will.
Or if it's just, but then you like, oh, there's like 100 of them now. Are you sure you want to aggro all 100 of them, or go away? But it's one of those things where it's like having a tidal wave of spiders just chasing the party is a possible consequence for angering the spiders.
And Scott, I think hit it there as well. Now, Mar, I used to do a lot of what you do. Like I normally used to say, I'm trying to stop myself from doing it. Like, are you sure? And so you do the are you sure? What happens if the player does it anyway? Like, to what extent do you determine is the correct severity of consequence to the current scenario?
Well, I mean, if they aggro 20 spiders, like, okay, roll initiative. All right, well, let's see. You kill one spider, and let's see here. Let's roll chance to hit for the other 19 spiders. And well, I mean, then he ends up a liquefied pile of remains on the floor because of the sheer quantity of spider venom pumped into him.
Okay, so what if the scenario was instead of a combat scenario? What if the players are forewarned that they're going to be meeting with the king or queen? What kind of consequences or how severe of consequences do you put in place if the players decide to smart off or be rude or dissenting in front of the king or queen? Like what kind of severity can they expect?
Depends on which king or queen it is and why they're even talking to them in the first place. It's like it's like for example in Lord of the Rings when Frodo meets with Elrond, and I forget what exactly he said, but it was something that where Elrond was like, you know what, yes, I'm mad, but I'm going to laugh about it anyways because I don't really have a reason to actually be mad. And you just like see this brief moment where he just like wanted to be mad but decided not to be mad. It's like that's because of the fact that Elrond had a good reason to want to be nice to Frodo and his friends, even if he didn't like hobbits and would rather not have hobbits in his kingdom at all. He wanted to be nice to them. However, if it was someone who didn't want to be nice to him, like, one of those orc guys, and Frodo was trying to, like, I don't know, sent there to negotiate a peace treaty with someone who hates him. I mean, the same sort of thing might result in him, I don't know, head chopped off, maybe, who knows. Again, it's like, this is like, why are you here? What are you doing? That really, really sets the tone and potential rewards and also potential hazards of the scenario.
Okay. I'm gonna have a second question for you on as a follow up, but I'm gonna get to Shadow on this. So Shadow, with consequences or outcomes, be they good or bad, how do you determine the extent or the severity in case of consequences of player actions? Like, how do you measure that?
Well, first off, I wanted to address Scott real quick. I also never say, are you sure you want to do that? I'll say something more like, okay, why don't all of you decide what you're going to do? We'll give you a minute to think. And, because I don't want to use that phrase, because that phrase is just like literally telling them these days that that's a bad idea, but I want to see what happens anyways. The answer to your other question is I let the punishment fit the crime, whether it's a crime or not. Equal and opposite reactions sometimes. Sometimes, you may roll a reaction because you're not sure. I don't do that, but you could do that, because you're not sure how far you want to go. But for the most part, I mean, there are so many things in the game worse than death, if you think about it. I can give you a list of like 10 things players would rather not happen. They would rather die than happen. You know what I mean? They would rather die than be taken prisoner. They would rather die than lose their favorite magic weapon. Stuff like that. It's like I'll go those routes. Unless they've done something that's so obviously foolhardy and deadly, then maybe they are going to die. Right, going to jail. Yeah, they absolutely freaking lose their ever-loving minds at the prospect of that. I've seen entire parties, death first. Okay, you're all dead. Give me your character sheets. They're like, what? They're like, you said it. Yeah, right. Six Nations. So I literally take from some of the great writers of days gone by and look at how many ways the characters have managed to survive after, for example, hundreds, if not thousands of comic books. Batman and Superman are still running around doing their thing. You know what I mean? How many different ways did they avoid it? Try to, get them to think in those terms instead of, always, either, getting killed, running away, or bruising their way through combat. There's so many different things that you should try out to get away with whatever you're trying to get away with. But
So,
if you do something, there's always a most likely consequence or reaction. That's what I'm going to go with most of the time.
Using Superman as an example is actually something interesting because to me, the most notable thing about Superman when you look at the various members of the Justice League in DC Comics is that of all of them, Superman is the one who is most likely to win a combat encounter by talking the other side into giving up.
that's because he's undefeatable.
Well, in some cases, it's
speaking.
actually more that he convinces the other person that what they really want isn't something they're going to get through the methods that they're currently employing, and thus they're just like, okay, fine, I'll go home and be a nice person instead of trying to destroy the city.
I always kind of looked at it as he's super in every respect. That includes charisma and being able and wisdom and being able to, like you said, talk one's way out of a situation. It doesn't always have to be, put up your dukes.
So,
two notable examples, Quake, is like Major Disaster. He actually talks Major Disaster into joining the Justice League and renouncing being a supervillain permanently. And then there's Livewire, who he also talks into joining one of his super teams, but not the Justice League, some other team.
So, talking about the consequences of players' choices or actions, does fairness ever become a factor in determining what the outcome is? So they have prior knowledge of a certain situation, whether or not it's true, or if it's coming from the game master, it should be true to an extent. Like, yes, if they're chasing a red herring, you don't have to tell them it's a red herring, obviously. But if they are acting on knowledge that the game master has given and they come up against the circumstances of their choice, how much does fairness factor into determining what that outcome is? I'm going to start with Shadow on that one.
I'd almost need an example because fairness could require a die roll. It could require, let me hear your plan. Let me hear what your character says. Can you draw me a diagram of, like how you want to pole vault over these things? Something like that. It's kind of, I don't know. I would need
So, for example, I'll use the kingly court, for example. You are not from this realm. You have an audience with the king for various reasons. You're, supposed to be this big hero that's supposed to be this, savior from another land. The king invites you in. The only thing you know about the king thus far is that they are under a lot of stress and don't tolerate fools. You go into the courtroom and let's say you spoke out of turn. What do you think should the consequence of speaking out of turn, the character would know, oh, if I speak out of turn, this could turn ugly really fast. Is the punishment, or should the punishment fit the given knowledge that the player has about the scenario?
Well,
I'm
what?
stumbling all over myself tonight. Sorry.
No worries, man. The first thing that comes to mind is what's the alignment? If in fact you're using an alignment system, okay? Because if he's lawful good and he's still that way, because that's totally feasible, okay? He might say, I'm sorry, but apparently you do not know the customs of my land. I am the king, and I rule with a beneficent, but harsh hand when it comes to etiquette, etc. And you must not be aware that you're speaking out of turn, and I'm going to forgive it this time. But next time, you must understand that you will be properly punished or reprimanded for doing so. If you're a chaotic evil, you're like, guards, take this man, remove his tongue before the assembly.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, my first thought was like, well, I mean, in a real world court of law, they just tell you to sit down and wait your turn. I mean, they would at least
do it again. I'll hold you in contempt.
And well, I mean, hold you in contempt of court usually means kick you out and resolve the case without you being there, which would actually severely hurt you in terms of winning the case, possibly. But
unless it was throwing you in jail as well. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah. But it's like, it's not going to be like, you're the bailiffs are going to shoot you. No. That's not going to happen just because you said something stupid. But again, it's one of those like a proportionality of response. It's like, what is a reasonable scale of response?
And that's kind of the question I've been driving in. Like how do you determine what that scale of response is based on player actions?
I think,
Because
believe it or
I
not,
know there.
a lot of times it could really boil down to what's the alignment of the offended or aggrieved individual who's being irritated by your actions. How are they going to react?
I mean, there's also the old thing of, like, let the punishment fit the crime. Like, okay, well, if the crime was you shot a messenger, what would the adequate punishment for that would be? Yeah, that's the sort of thing where whoever sent the messenger might legitimately want to kill you.
The salt mines? That's funny.
Okay, so for me, whenever I've given a scenario to players and they find themselves in a situation where their actions have led them to this point, I gauge what it is because I'm taking notes constantly. Be it like just minor notes here or there, like names and dates and such, but because I'm taking notes on what my players are doing and the actions they take, as well as what they might say, I can kind of gauge the response my players are going to receive, be it good or bad, based upon what choices they have made up to that point. If I know that they've been trying to be fairly decent human beings and, trying to be morally good, if not necessarily lawful, they're probably going to get actually, no, that's not probably, they are going to get a better outcome based on their all of their choices leading up to that. Now, if they've been, absolute raging dick blisters about things and, just been an entire pain in the ass the entire night, making all the choices that would, land most people either in jail or, 6 feet under, well, that's what's going to happen to them. Like that is the most likely outcome, and that is the outcome I'm going to lean into. Like, these are the choices you made up to this point, and this is going to be the response. Your choices will have equal responses to whatever is happening in the world. So to my players, and I would even say for other game masters out there, if your player's response is when they wake up to choose violence, violence chooses them. That's the equal response. That's the fair outcome. If your players wake up in the morning and they choose diplomacy, well, that should likely be the best outcome. Now, if there are situations where diplomacy isn't going to be an option, there are foes that they're going to face that will not let diplomacy be the option. Because they're either too enraged or the players don't necessarily understand the political nature of what's going on, or they don't understand their opponent's customs at all. So, the party rolls up onto a barbarian horde and they try to be diplomatic about things. They, the first person to be diplomatic might lose their head until, negotiations are reached.
There's also the possibility that it is easy to ascertain what your opponent wants and figure out how to give them what they want, and then come to the conclusion that there is no way you can do that and get what you want at the same time, because what they want is, maybe to just like kill all of you and put your heads on pikes. It's entirely possible that that is actually what your opponent wants. So when it's that, diplomacy, no. But if it's something like we want 100 bushels of wheat, maybe you can swing that.
Now, we've got about 45 minutes left in the night. Now, Mar, you wanted to discuss, and I'm open to the idea of this. You wanted to discuss fairness between players. Now, this is kind of a tangential topic. It's more topic adjacent in my thoughts.
Well,
but you wanted to talk about having a fair and level playing field for players.
It's something that we kind of sort of bumped into earlier in this discussion, is that different characters aren't necessarily equal, and
Right.
and that's just one
Nor
of
should they be.
those things where it's like, it's like a thief and a barbarian. Which one has higher, brute strength? Obviously, the barbarian, but that's because the barbarian and the thief do different things, and
Mhm.
but then you have the whole thing is like when there's a character class that has this potential list of spells that's like 200 miles long, and you choose spells that sound useful, and then you get into a combat encounter and then realize that, oh wait, I actually wasn't able to use any of those, and you don't actually have the option to simply change them because of the fact that the way your character class works, you learn spells when you level up, and most you can get maybe outside, but not easily.
So your thought there is that not all character types are equal, right?
Well, this is actually one of those things that honestly to me is more a matter of game balance as a whole, but as a
Okay.
DM, maybe give players like ideas about like, maybe possibly this would be a better idea. I mean, obviously it's up to the player what they actually are going to do. It's just that sometimes, nudging them in what you think is a useful direction, rather not necessarily the right direction, but something that's helpful. Because one example from a Hyperborea game. Yes, it was the same one where I was playing a priest. We actually had a party member die because of the fact that my character didn't know how to cleanse poison. And people are like, wait, what? Why don't you know how to do that? And it's like, you do know that there's like 20 other spells that aren't cleanse poison, right? And I can only choose like 4 of them.
Okay.
Boy. But yeah, it's like,
So
I mean, a DM creating a scenario can, hint to players like these are things that would be useful for you to have or know, and you don't necessarily tell them what to do.
Literally never do
Shadow,
any
you're
of that.
muted, sir.
Yeah, I literally
Yeah,
never do any of that. I
Act-
don't want to help them. I want to see what happens just as much as they do. I don't want to give any whiff of potentially trying to manipulate the story. I want to leave it all up to them, and if they fail miserably, we'll all have a good laugh and come back next week with a bunch of new characters and a new situation. I don't have like any preconceived notions. I want to see what they do, just as as if I was just watching the game from the sidelines.
And I'm in the same boat as you, Shadow. I have done this where a prepared divine caster goes to bed in the evening. They receive a message from their god in the form of a dream, typically. It's typically a scenario that the player may find themselves in. And they may be suggested, hey, in the near future, you may need this power, because all divine spells are given to the clerics by their gods when they prepare spells. The clerics might go, well, I was thinking about preparing this spell. You may prepare that spell. That is fine. However, I am, the god is suggesting to you that this may be important. You may not know when or why.
Anything wrong with hints at all, Mar or Jaide? I just like to be as surprised as as much as anybody else, so to speak. I want to give them the situation and see how they're going to figure it out. Now, like with the pre-spells or hints or lore, or clues or things like that. That's the way I'll do it. But it never like person to person. I'm going to do it through the narration and see if they, pick up on it. If not, move right the hell along.
Well, like that Reddit thread I mentioned on Discord was actually up. The topic of it was about DMs talking to players as before they actually start the first session of the game. It's like, okay, this may or may not be a good idea for a character. That sort of thing. It's like my personal stance on that is that, one, you shouldn't pigeonhole players into playing a role like that. You really shouldn't.
Well, here's the maybe an exception to that. If there's, for example, say there's already a bunch of fighters or clerics or magic users or thieves, and they could really use like maybe a ranger or a druid or something that kind of is a universally accepted balancing factor for the 4 food groups. You go into a dungeon without a thief, you might want to rethink that strategy. You know what I mean? Or someone who can open locks and that sort of thing. Or are you guys really sure you want to go without a healer? Okay, that kind of thing. But I'm not going to say you absolutely have to have this or that. But sometimes there's going to be those situations where you kind of need to sort of at least make a well-rounded squad of characters. If every although maybe not. I'm in a sci-fi game where we're all soldiers and we all have little specialties, but we're all very, very different.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that came up in that thread is looking at it from the perspective of some sets of player choices when creating characters are just not as good as others. And to me, that's like, okay, how are you defining what's good and bad? And
well, if the first adventure is going to be going after undead, a monk might not be the best choice.
The other side of that is, if game masters decide, hey, I don't want wizards in my game, and then they kind of lay it out in session 0, like, hey, I don't want wizards in the game. I don't want, X, Y, and Z. The game master should keep it fair at all times and not allow his NPCs to be wizards or the things they don't allow. Now, I'm preparing a Bronze Age like Conan-esque game where everyone has magic, and while barbarians do technically exist under a different name, like Marauder, they're not an available class option or type option to the players immediately out the gate because the Marauders are not from their region natively. The region the players are starting in is, travel was difficult in the Bronze era. You didn't typically travel more than 100 miles from home, and I'm keeping to that theme. So, the Marauders will have to come to them first before they can discover, oh, hey, maybe that's something I want to look into and start doing and become a Marauder. Or, thieves aren't necessarily something that are going to be an open class option at the very beginning. They'll have to travel to a large city to understand why people are thieves or the rogue types, because in larger cities they're more prevalent. So I am going to lock certain options for players behind like certain areas or regions, and the players, it's up to the players to go out, adventure, role play, and discover those options that they can then add to their character portfolio of what they are capable of doing. I'm kind of in the mood for a discovery kind of play where I have the master map, or I have the master map. So I know where things are. I may not know exactly what the countryside looks like. I don't have it sketched out or drawn, but I know where things are. I know what regions have what philosophies, or what kind of capabilities, whether it be the Grand Wizard School or a scholarly enclave. Like, I know where those are in the world, And if the players decide, yeah, I'm going to go that direction until I hit something, awesome, let's do that. Let's go there. Oh, hey, you found the scholars, enclave. If you are a scholarly type, you can study here if you wish and increase either your magic potential. You can increase your knowledge about the world. You can, do all these things, discover new technologies. And that's where, the players have all of the keys in their pocket. They just don't know what those keys unlock yet. And to me, that discovery method of play, I think, is going to be a key feature or focus in my next game, because I want my players to explore the world that I have.
Another good couple of examples would be races, if they just don't live here, and maybe you don't want any evil characters in the party. You want the players to be the big damn heroes, for whatever reason. Some people are going to rail against that, but maybe this isn't the particular campaign for them right now. Maybe later on, after they've heard how much fun everybody's having, they're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, actually that sounds like fun. Okay, I'll save running an assassin for some other campaign, or group.
I mean, I have actually in a 5e game actually played an assassin. It's just one of those things where he's a soldier who he's an assassin because his specialty as a soldier, well, sailor really, was sniping people. Like, he'd get up in the rigging on a boat and, it's like an enemy on the other ship. He just like put an arrow into him, that sort of thing. Not someone who did it because he was being paid as a hitman. Just, his job.
Well, as soon as you start, holding your hand out money for murder, you're a different kind of assassin.
Yeah,
a sniper is not an assassin.
Yeah, exactly. It's that he had this sort of like sniping skills that would make him incredibly lethal in combat because he practiced hitting people from a quarter mile away. But see, this is the whole thing. It's like you're looking at alignments, and one of the things that I've seen people discussing with alignments is, and this does kind of sort of fit into the concept of fairness, but in the sense of fairness to the people playing the game, is that some alignments don't make sense in the story. It's like you're not going to have a chaotic, evil, dark knight walk into a holy temple and have the people maintaining the holy temple treat him with kindness and respect. They're going to tell him to GTFO, and maybe possibly he'll get smited by their god just for deigning to set foot in the temple.
See that I'm gonna counter you on that, because I'm gonna argue with you on that one. So if the Dark Knight enters a temple of good, a temple of of righteousness and divine glory, and yes, sure, the temple knights or the paladins of the temple are going to be wary. They're going to have their shields at the ready. They're going to have their hands on their sword. They're going to be ready for combat if necessary. But the clergy aren't necessarily going to turn that Dark Knight away, because it is their job to try to convert that Dark Knight to their path. It's not, yeah, sure. Most people are like, oh yeah, no, that Dark Knight should, get the hell out of there. No. If the clergy is worth their salt and they are of a good alignment, especially lawful good, their job is not to deny entry to those who seek a better path. Their job is to set them on the right path, or set them on the right path according to their God. That is their mission. Get as many converts to their God as possible. So if a Dark Knight in my game world, if one of my players is playing this Dark Knight, or this like edge lord, moderately evil character, and they walk into a temple of the light demanding to be healed, one, the temple's gonna be like, well, we won't necessarily heal you. We will heal you, but it will cost you. It may not cost you necessarily coin. It might cost you service. because strength does not make one capable of leadership. It makes one capable of service. And so I'm going to be doing those kinds of things. I'm going to be working on that character from that point, that perspective. Every time that character walks into a divine temple, I, as the game master, through the NPCs, am going to be trying to convert them to a better path, because that is, in my opinion, that is what the clergy of those divine gods should be doing. They shouldn't necessarily just be turning people away out of hand because they're evil.
Well,
now, somebody comes there, with violence in mind, they will receive violence in turn through the paladins.
Well, my point though was more about, why would you choose to send this guy to discuss whatever matter? Because, like, presumably a king or some other benefactor has sent a team of people to go talk to these people in this temple. Why would you choose someone like that to send?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I was reading the chat. Can you ask that again?
Well, it's a matter of, like, why would you choose someone like that to be a member of the party to go discuss things with the priests in this temple, when you know that the priests in the temple are going to, shall we say, not like him?
And it doesn't matter if they like him or not. So this is, I think Shadow hit the wrong button. So in my opinion, as the game master, even as a player, I do this whenever I'm playing like a paladin or a clergyman. My NPC clergyman, and this is kind of across the board for all of my games, if you walk into a temple of a divine or of a lawful good temple or god, you should expect these things. You should expect to be received, and you should be expected to tithe or pay some kind of payment to receive services at the temple. They won't turn you away, because that would be them not accepting the fact that someone may be trying to turn over a new leaf, and that the potential of loss to the clergy of lawful good deities, the potential loss of the opportunity to change someone to them is too great of a risk. They want every soul they can for their deity.
That's not really the angle I was looking at with this. Is that it's not so much the fact the idea that the guy would be banned from being there. It's more that it's one of those things where you look at, like, what are the in-story reasons for people making choices, and some choices don't make sense when you look at it from that perspective. That's kind of where I was going with that.
Okay.
It's
yeah, sure. Why would
the priests like to go away just because they don't like you? No. Would they be welcoming to you? Also no.
Again, I think that it depends on the circumstance and how you role play the characters.
There's room for variation.
Like
there, sure.
A den of thieves isn't going to just allow some kid off the street to enter their den. Like there are tests for that. The local cult network isn't necessarily going to just willy-nilly take people in just to have more bodies for the sacrifice. At least not in the upper echelons. They'll take the bodies as sacrifice, sure, but they're not going to allow those people to have access to information that could harm the cult. Everything has, it's not just all I'm going to do is I'm going to just use diplomacy and I'll get right in. They'll want to talk to me just because my skill ranks are high enough or some such. That's not always the case, and it should never be the case. Like you have to actually role play it and work through the scenario. Just because you can roll a nat 20 doesn't mean you just succeed at something.
That's one of those things where you have to establish a scenario to make it work. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
the
and
specifics of what
so
that
long as
scenario is, well, there's a
right,
lot of
and
good stuff to think about.
right, and depending on what that scenario is, you keep it fair. Like once you set up the scenario, you can't just change it because you want to. Like change. I mean, yes, you are the game master. If you choose to do this, your mileage may vary on what the circumstances are and what the outcomes are. But once you've set up the scenario, you can change it over time, to do something slightly different. But once you've set the bar of what it is, don't just change it. Because the players are going to be working off that knowledge, and that knowledge should hold true up until a point when they discover new knowledge that might change something. Hold on, is that a question here? 20 healing take effect, or do they resort to physical healing? What is the additional cost? Oh, okay. Clerics, sphere of influence. And this gets into like the balance and rules and mechanics part of it. There were mechanics in in Iron Kingdoms that dealt with people who were of opposing alignment and healing magic. I would highly look up the 3.0 rules of Iron Kingdoms because I really enjoyed the disparity of magical healing there, and if you weren't of the same god, it could actually do more harm than good. I did like that. So,
Oh, right. Well, I mean, the entire reason I brought up that whole thing is like the basic concept of having an evil party or evil character in a party when, what are the characters' reasons for working together? You have to establish that from an in-universe perspective. And just as, a part of the story. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But
right.
it all depends on the scenario and stuff. And as Max Liao loves to point out, having a player who is being an evil character just to be a dick to the other players never goes well. But if
it really doesn't.
A character who is genuinely trying to help the party and further the goals of whatever organization the party is working for. Why is the character evil?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm so brain dead lately. I've been putting in long hours and a lot of things going on. So, Shadow, do you have anything further on this topic of balance as a false god and to be rather fair than be in balance?
Like El said before, you got to be consistent, and you also as the GM have to think about the ramifications of your decisions because they can come up and bite you in the rear later on down the road. Think try we're supposed to be able to improvise and fly by the seat of our pants and come up with snap decisions at an instant, but also master the ability to think it through as quickly as you can and try to look ahead to see if you do this this one time, is it going to be taken advantage of later, or is it going to create a problem for you or the players? Because a lot of times you'll want to err on the side of the players and give them a break here and there, but you give them too many breaks and the next thing you know, they're just cutting through things. Maybe things are too easy now, or maybe things are even too hard, and next thing you know, you're looking at an empty table.
Mar, any closing thoughts on balance and fairness?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like Shadow said. It's that the setting the rules for how the players are going to play the game is a huge part of defining what constitutes fairness as part of a TTRPG. And you, as the GM, need to abide by the rules you set, because you can't just, like arbitrarily change things just because you think it would be funny, I guess is one way to put it. It's like that's not fair, because the players can't play by the rules if the rules.
Keep changing.
I guess it's like the old like pulling the rug out from under somebody thing. It's like, oh hey, you're supposed to walk down the red line on the carpet. Oops, the carpet's not there anymore. That doesn't work.
So my only thoughts at closing of this is, if you, the game master, are running a game and you've allowed all these different books or different material at the game, but you haven't fully read it, that's kind of on you. One. But if you decide at the end of session, hey, I didn't like what's a spell that I've heard people hate, silvery barbs, whatever the fuck it does. If you don't like the spell, because of whatever it does, talk to your player and be like, hey, going forward, I really don't appreciate the spell. I think it breaks the immersion or breaks the whatever the scene is. And just have that conversation with them and then move forward from that point. Moonbolt.
Like,
oh God.
One example I've heard people talk about, like things players do that annoy the GM, is having a bard decide to seduce major NPCs just for the lulz. And one of the things
that is annoying.
Someone pointed out, it's like, yes, okay, fine, you succeeded at seducing the drow lady. Thing is, her idea of having sex with you involves executing you after she's done with you.
Yep, good job.
It's just one
I've
of
had those players as well.
like consequences for your actions, and going back to are you sure you want to do that thing? Because like as a GM, I wouldn't actually say that, probably, but it's the whole like line of logic is like, players sometimes do things without thinking through the consequences, or rather they think there won't be consequences when they're realistically should be consequences, and rather bad consequences some of the time.
Yep,
Or worse,
Ricky
you're
Scott.
married now. Yeah, that's a good one.
Or worse, yeah. So I do want to thank everyone in chat for showing up tonight. Without you, we'd just be a panel of guys, of game masters, shouting into the uncaring void of YouTube. So I do appreciate the live chat, and I also will appreciate any comments left on this video after the show ends. Your commentary is important to me. I do actually read the comments, the ones that YouTube deems not offensive, I guess. I've had to actually go unhide contents in the past, or comments in the past, because YouTube's like, oh, this is offensive, whatever. So thank you so much for watching. Shadow, do you have anything coming up this weekend?
Well, before the weekend, I've got another craft video with me and the boy. I'm going to continue my Dark Sun review. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that tomorrow or if I'm going to continue the other series I'm running, which is the Put Up or Shut Up video, where I'm trying to get people who do things in the hobby, whether it's painting, crafting, modeling, or even gaming and role playing and that sort of thing, to get up off your tail feathers and show us. Let's see some videos. Let's see you maybe on my show Sunday, where I'm going to show off the stuff I've done this week, and let people come on and show me what they've done. There's a whole lot of this. I want to see a lot more action, deeds, not words kind of thing. Let's see what you're made of. Let's see what you can do. Let's see what you've done. And, show people out there, that we are more than just a bunch of this.
Mar, what have you got coming up?
I'm currently planning on redoing the Devil Girl from Mars video I did, because I rewatched it after making it and realized that I left out several of the points I wanted to discuss and ended up wasting like 30 minutes talking about stuff that didn't really matter.
It's
Oh,
so
and-
funny we both watched that movie within like a week of each other, out of nowhere. I mean, this is like a 1952 black and white. You know, what the hell are you? You know, why are you showing me this movie? But he and I both watched it within a week of each other, not knowing. It's kind of one of those weird, you know,
Yeah.
quantum things.
And it's actually a very memorable movie because of the fact that it poses a very novel and interesting scenario for the human characters in the story to deal with, and not something they can just make go away. Well, but yeah, it's like I realized that I didn't do a good enough job scripting it because, in part, I actually doubled the length of the presentation like 30 minutes before I actually recorded it, and hadn't actually like properly thought through how I was going to use the new material, because for something made in 1955 and filmed on black and white film, there are actually colorized versions of certain scenes from the movie that were colorized by the original production team so that they could be used as publicity photos for advertising the movie. Which is one of those things like, oh, so this is what the people making the movie visualized the movie looking like, and what it is close to what it would have looked like if it had been in color.
So you're going to be remaking that video and launching it this weekend, you said?
Hopefully, if I get time for that.
Well, go check that out if you want to watch his commentary on that. As for me, this is my Tabletop Tavern. I'm Jade, and this is Gatekeepers. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please consider hitting that subscribe button and that like button. You can subscribe to the channels linked in the description below, and we'll see you next week on, well, a new topic. Have a great night, everyone.